Okay, hello everybody. Today we're here in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 in Aerosoft's CRJ 700. Today we're not doing a flight, so instead we're going to take a look at the differences between tools like Navigraph Charts, Foreflight Web, and Foreflight for iOS as flight planning aids and navigational aids for your flight. So we are parked here on the ramp at Bradley International in the CRJ 700. This will be an actual flight I'm going to do, but you'll have to wait until my next video to see it. So this flight will be Bradley to Norfolk, which is a payware airport that I just picked up because I have a bit of a problem with purchasing payware airports, I admit. But you'll get to benefit from that problem and get to see it. So I've done all of my flight planning, and normally I do it in SkyVector, but over the past year I've also picked up a subscription to the basic plan for Foreflight. So I do use Foreflight as a supplement for some of my flights. And I've also had Navigraph, just the air rack cycle as a base plan. So I added on Navigraph Charts, which was like $1.50 prorated, I think, for the remainder of my subscription. So I thought I would give those a try. It's a monthly subscription, so if I don't like it, I could always dump it after a month. So which to choose? So we'll start with Navigraph. If you've been in flight sim for a while, I'm sure you've heard of Navigraph. There's two flavors of it. There's a basic subscription, which just updates your AirX cycle so that you've got all the latest and greatest nav aids. And then there's Navigraph Charts. So that integrates charts into your subscription, and it has a really slick interface that's for Windows, it's for iOS, I think it's for Android. It's got iPad apps. It's got a web interface, you name it, you can get at Navigraph Charts. So I've got Navigraph Charts up here for the flight. First and foremost, Navigraph is really for IFR flights. You certainly can use the tools. If you're flying VFR, it'll still have a moving map, but it's going to be a moving map either over, I'll show you, either over just a generic world map, or an IFR low or IFR high en route map. So there's no VFR sectionals for Navigraph Charts. If you're looking for a moving map over a VFR sectional, there are lots of plugins to do that, but Navigraph is not one of them. But if you like IFR flying, then Navigraph is an awesome tool. First and foremost, it's got the world. So if you use SkyVector for IFR flying, SkyVector is for the United States. So if you like to fly internationally, you're going to need another way to get international IFR plates, and Navigraph is a great way to do that. The second benefit to it is it's really slick. So we'll show you the interface very quickly. I've plugged in my Bradley to Norfolk flight plan already and picked out all the airways and departures I want to fly. So it's showing them here. And at the bottom, I've pinned some of the charts that I'll be using, which I can then overlay on this map. So if I click on Bradley up here and do an open charts list, on the left we have the SIDs, the stars, the approach plates, and all of the taxi charts. So if I click on this, I'll get the taxi diagram. You can see it's georeferenced, so it's showing the location of my CRJ 700 parked here. So this is great when you're taxiing because you can see where you're at in the airport when you're given taxi instructions. It's got all of the other supplemental plates that you'll have for an airport. Stars, approaches, SIDs, reference plates. So as you pick out the ones that you want, you can pin them, and when you pin them, they show up down here. Pinned charts can be overlaid. So I am taking off from Bradley, flying the Coastal 9 departure from Bradley. That's right down here, and there's an overlay to en route map. And this is awesome. So when I click this, it overlays the departure plate for the Coastal 9 departure. And that's a moving map. So as I fly that, I can see my progress along the departure It's got all the reference information over here. So when we do this flight, we'll be departing most likely from runway 33. So I know I have to climb heading 328 or assign to HFD VOR, which is right here. And then the rest of the routing is under here. Then to Thumb, Yoder, and CCC. When I get to where I'm going, which is Norfolk, I'm planning on doing the ILS, and same deal, I can overlay the ILS plate. So I'm doing a Cape Charles transition for this flight to my initial approach fix, and it all connects up. You can see where I intercept this, and again, that's a moving map, so I'll be able to track my progress. So that's an awesome feature. Being able to overlay all of your plates for the airports is fantastic. You can zoom into the airport and bring up the taxi diagram, see where you're at the airport. Also fantastic. And you can pin anything you want down here. So if you wanted to pin some of the reference plates that had obstacle, departure procedures, things like that, they are all good to go. The other really powerful tool for this is the visualization for the approaches. So I've already chosen that when I get to Norfolk, I'm going to go direct to the ILS. I'm not going to fly a star. But if I were to click on Norfolk here and open up my charts, there are 2 stars here. Let me get rid of the ILS. Okay, so you can see that there are 2 stars here for Norfolk, and if I click on Show Overview, it will show me what each looks like. So this is the Drone 2 star, and these are the transitions. So Drone 2 is appropriate if you're coming from the southwest, which we are not. And this is the Turks 2 with its transition, which is appropriate if you're coming from the northwest, again, which we are not. So neither of these are really appropriate for our flight route. We're coming from the northeast, which lines up almost directly with the ILS. So we're going to transition from our VOR to our initial approach fix for the ILS and not choose any of these. So for big airports where you have half a dozen stars, it's great just to bring them all up and see which one visually makes sense. On the pull bar up here, you've got same sort of information. I clicked on this and brought up the charts, but I could have just as well clicked on the pull bar and brought up all of the approaches. Again, clicking on the little eyeball will visualize those different approaches. So that's all the different ILS and RNAV approaches, and you can pick the one that's appropriate. Just like SimBrief, and this is integrated with SimBrief because I think it's the same company. You can click on Auto Route and it will suggest routes for you. You can type the route in manually like you would with SkyVector. Super easy. So I love Navigraph. I can bring this up on a second monitor running the app. There's a web interface if you don't have the app. You could run it on your iPad, your iPhone, and this is really cool. It has an in-game plugin that is exactly this interface. So as far as I could tell, it has all the functionality of the app built as a toolbar menu inside of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So you can just bring it up in flight and do the same thing with clicking on approaches, visualizing them, overlaying plates. It's all there. Awesome. So that's the first option to take a look at. Okay, the next tool to look at is Foreflight on the web. So there's a web app for Foreflight, and then there's an iOS app that works on iPad or iPhone for Foreflight. Really, the real app is the one that works on your iPhone and iPad, and the reason I say that is because the web app is like the bare bones of flight planning. So it really doesn't have most of the functionality that you get with the iPad app. It's pricey. The base membership for Foreflight's around $100 a year, and the premium one is around $200. I can't remember the exact values. Now, if you're a pilot, that's nothing. You're going to spend $200 to fly your plane for an hour. So $200 for a year for something that gives you all of the situational awareness of Foreflight is just a no-brainer. As a flight simulator enthusiast, Foreflight's a bit of overkill. You don't need to do all the fuel planning and trip planning and track fuel prices and like all the things that you have to do if you're really flying your airplane someplace. So if you're just using it to have a moving map and trip planning, things like Navigraph are a much better solution. However, Foreflight works for everything. So it works for VFR flight, it works for IFR flight. You have tons of plates, right? So I can switch over to sectional maps, IFR low, IFR high. Foreflight has their own style of, turn these off. Aeronautical maps. You can overlay the Foreflight data, their aeronautical maps on any of the maps. Turn on radar, turn on traffic, TFR, segments, visibility, winds, lightning, fuel, like everything you could possibly want as a pilot. So we'll leave this on the IFR high setting. Over here I've typed in my flight plan. There is no visualization for SIDS and stars like there is in Navigraph. So you can go to an airport and look up its SID or star. So if I type KBDL up here, I'll get Bradley Airport, and I can scroll down through all the frequencies here, find the procedures. Here's my departure. I can look up the Coastal 9, which is the one we're going to fly, and it works a lot like Sky Vector, so it pops up the diagram. But that's it. You can't overlay that on the map. It won't visualize the different SIDS and stars. So you have to figure that out yourself, at least through the web interface. Now that's not the case with the iPad version. We'll show that in a minute too. But for the web interface, you're just typing everything in text. You can see where you're going, which is nice. There's no moving map option for this. And again, that's a difference between the web interface and the iPad interface. There is it's like a script that you download that Foreflight sends you to that will connect Microsoft Flight Simulator to your iPad app, and that'll give you a moving map. But it does not work with the web interface. So the web interface is just static. You can just use it for planning purposes. So not a lot to say about the web interface. It works, but to be honest, it's not that much better than just using Sky Vector. You're really just typing in your route, seeing the lines connect on the screen, opening up the procedures, reading them, and taking notes. It's not helping you too much with flight simulator, flight planning. Okay, the last one to show is Foreflight. So Foreflight is for Apple devices only, so it can run on an iPad, iPad mini, or iPhone. I actually don't have an iPad mini, but if you're a pilot, that's probably what you're running it on, because that's nice and compact, and you could attach it to your flight controls. Right now for this demo, I've got it on the iPad. Full disclosure, I almost never get to use the iPad in my house. It's usually in my daughter's hand, and she's usually playing Roblox on it. So if I do use it when I'm doing Flight Simulator, I'm usually running it on my iPhone, which is kind of a small screen for it. But you can see that it looks a lot like the web interface, but everything's touch. So of course, a big selling point for Foreflight is that it's pinch and zoom and touch and just much faster than any other way that you're going to interface with the data. I've got the IFR map up, similar to the web interface. You could bring up any flavor of map you want, VFR, IFR, overlay it with traffic, winds, you name it. You can see that I've got the Bradley departure with radar vectors to HFD, and then we fly our Coastal 9 departure. Flight plan's up here, so you type that in and it'll fill in the blanks as you put in your different waypoints. If you want to fly a procedure, tap on procedure, and if I go down here to Norfolk and look at the arrivals for Norfolk, it'll overlay them. So you've got visualizations. There's Turks and Drone 2. As we back out, you see I can overlay things like airspaces, airports, nav aids. A little hard to see. I have to zoom in for these, These are the center frequencies, the little postage stamps. So super easy to use. You can do VFR, and out of the two versions of Foreflight subscriptions, the more expensive one will overlay approach and departure plates on your map, just like Navigraph will. It will also give you georeferenced airport diagrams, so you can see where you're at when you want to taxi. However, even if you buy the cheaper version, even though you won't get the taxi diagrams themselves, Foreflight has this aeronautical overlay, which will overlay the airport with the taxiways for most airports. So even though you don't have the official airport diagram, Foreflight will still show you where you're at the airport and let you follow yourself along as you taxi. So really handy. To connect to your iPad, there's an app that you download from Flight Events and run it in the background. And when you do that, it actually gives you a plugin, a toolbar plugin, which will bring up the Flight Events map. So it's not bringing up the Foreflight map, very important distinction. It's bringing up the Flight Events map, which does have VFR sectionals, I think for the US, along with the generic map, but it doesn't have IFR maps, and it doesn't have any of this functionality. Just lets you see where you're on the map, so you can get kind of a low-tech moving map using it built into the simulator. But really you're going to be holding an iPad or an iPhone and following along here as you're in the simulator. So if we go to Foreflight's website and click on the plans and pricing, yeah, it's pretty expensive, and like I said, it's overkill, I think, for flight simulation. If you're planning on being a pilot, though, you're probably going to end up with Foreflight, in which case it's nice to have the option to connect it to Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and use the same tool in flight simulation that you use in the cockpit. I have the Basic Plus plan at $99 a year. It's set to expire this spring. That's hopefully when I'm going to do my discovery flight. So if I do my discovery flight, I will renew it. If I don't, I'll probably let it expire because I don't really use it that much for flight simulation, and I think that Navigraph for IFR flying is a better option. The $200 a year does give you the geo-referenced approach charts and the taxi diagrams, but you know, all the other stuff you get for that is stuff that you're not going to need in flight simulation. And the $299 version gets you into 3D visualization of your airports, 3D reviews, synthetic vision, time and fuel calculations, all sorts of stuff, again, that you're going to use if you're really flying, but that you won't use for flight simulation. Navigraph looks like this. So these prices are in euro instead of US dollars. Keep that in mind. There's the basic app that just updates your database. That's what I had for the longest time. Even when I used X-Plane, I used the nav data yearly, which was €25.90. The ultimate monthly or the ultimate yearly, so the ultimate monthly is €830. That's actually not a bad way to try it out. So, you know, a little over €8 to try it for a month and see if you like it is probably not a bad investment. Yearly, $74.90. So you're starting to get pricey there. It's not quite Foreflight priciness, but it's in the neighborhood. And that gives you the whole enchilada. So that gives you the charts, plus the nav data, plus all the different apps. So which one would I recommend? Well, that depends. If you are IFR flying and you are not a real-world pilot, get Navigraph. It is entirely built for flight simulation. It's going to have everything that you need for flight simulation. If you are VFR flying, then Navigraph probably isn't a great value. Yeah, you can get a moving map with it, but it's not going to have VFR sectionals on it, and there are free VFR sectional maps. In fact, the app that Foreflight directs you to, Flight Event, I think, and I'll put the link here, I think you can just download that. It's a free app, and it gives you the in-game moving map with VFR sectionals. I don't think you need a Foreflight login to use it because it doesn't ask for that anyplace. So if you just want a VFR sectional moving map, just use one of the free ones. Navigraph isn't going to help you out much there. For taxi diagrams, sure, you could use those, but 74, 90 euros a year just to get taxi diagrams might be a bit much. Foreflight for VFR flying, again, it depends. I think if you are a real-life pilot or if you are a hardcore flight sim enthusiast, which I'm borderline there because I'm thinking of becoming a real-life pilot and I want to emulate what I'll be doing as much as possible, then yeah, I think that I think Foreflight is probably a good investment. You can get used to it. You'll use the same tools that you use in real life, and that's pretty good. If you're a casual flight simmer, then $100 a year to have a moving VFR sectional is probably not a good investment, since you could get it for free, right? I just mentioned a couple apps where you can just get that in-game for free, and you don't need to spend money for it. So there you have it. So I'm going to do my next flight out of Bradley using the Aerosoft CRJ 700 to Norfolk, and I will be using Navigraph, which I'll bring up as part of the flight brief to walk you through how I plan the flight. So you'll get to see it in use in my next flight. So be sure to stay tuned for that video, and we'll see how it goes. So if you enjoy content like this, be sure to click that like button, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, as always, for flying along with me, and stay tuned for further flight adventures.